Tanya, you can start asking your first
Thank
question.
you. First, it's an honor to meet you, Jeff, and to have this opportunity to learn from your insights. I really appreciate talking to you and answering my questions. Thank you. First, my question is, in what ways do you think Krashen's theories might evolve or adapt with the recent advances in AI and language learning technology? Could these developments challenge any core aspects of his ideas?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for your wonderful question. Let's make sure that everybody's mic is muted, including yours, because otherwise, okay, that's
Okay.
yeah. It's better to mute. My experience on these Skype calls, it's best to mute all of our mics, and then when it's your turn, if you want to ask another question when I'm done, that's fine. But thank you for your question, and again, I apologize for the crazy time system that we have here, where we change the hours every 6 months. I hate it, by the way, and a lot of Americans really hate having to do this, but we won't go into that right now. There are always things that we hate about our system, and this is one of the things I hate. Okay. So thank you for the question. It's a great question, actually. I'm going to spend a little extra time on this question because I really like this one, and because artificial intelligence is such an important topic right now. I'm guessing that Amir and maybe some of your other teachers have already talked about using AI in the classroom. I assume everybody knows about what AI is and what what AI is capable of. So I'm going to answer your question in 3 ways. The first way I'm going to answer it is talk about the core of your question, which I think is, does the technology that we now have change something essential about language acquisition theory, whether it's Krashen's ideas or anyone else's theories of language acquisition? And my answer to that is no. I don't think it changes anything theoretically about what we think language acquisition is, whether it's first language or second language acquisition. And the reason is that AI has a certain process that's based on, the current AI models are based on something called large language models, where they look at lots of different language inputs and they look for patterns, right? This is one way of getting something done. It's a process of completing a task. The brain isn't necessarily using the same processes. So AI on a theoretical level isn't a challenge to anything we previously thought was true about language acquisition. The only sort of technological change that might affect our theoretical view of language acquisition would be if it were technology that, for example, allowed us to look at the brain in a different way and see that the brain was operating in ways that we thought are different than what we thought before. So technology, in my view, isn't going to change our theoretical views about language acquisition, the how of what happens. Instead, it's going to change the practical aspects. Now, that's the second way I want to answer a question. Are there practical things about language acquisition in Krashen's theory that AI is going to affect? And there, the answer is absolutely yes. In fact, it could change almost everything that we do when it comes to language teaching. Now, I say could. That's a very important modal verb here. Could means it might change it. It probably won't, okay? But it might change it. Every new technology, and if I may say so, Amir and I, who've been around this earth for a longer time than most of you, I think that's fair to say. We've seen a lot of different technologies come, and people say, "Oh, this one's going to change everything, right? I remember I was in school back in the 1970s, and back then, television, of course, had been around for 20, 30 years, but teachers were using television in the classroom, and everyone thought, oh, this is going to change everything. I mean, television is going to change the entire world of language teaching. And then there was a new technology, and there was the internet. Well, yes, the internet has changed language teaching technology. And now there's AI, and AI is going to change language teaching as well. But it isn't going to change it unless the people who use it know what to do with it. There's an expression that I've used a lot in my interviews and talks, which is a fool, a person who isn't very smart, right? A fool with a tool would be anything you use to do something. This is a ruler, this is a tool. A fool with a tool is still a fool, okay? If you don't know how to use language acquisition theory, if you don't understand the right way to use the tool, then it doesn't really matter what tool you have. It's useless. It won't do you any good. It won't help you. So AI is one of those tools that has the potential. It's possible, if you know what you're doing, to really change language teaching. Now, will it? Will most people use AI in a way that changes language teaching? My guess is no. Why? Because they don't understand something that you guys understand now. You understand good language acquisition theory. And because you do, you have the potential of using AI to change the way you teach language. Now, how could you use AI? Let me give you some practical examples. And by the way, these are things that I do a lot. And I might have talked about this in a previous video, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself. That's one of the things about getting old. You repeat yourself. That's one of the things about getting old. You repeat yourself. Oh, wait, did I say that already? Yeah. Okay. Number one, AI can take input and make it more comprehensible. So you can take a text from the internet, and you can copy it into an AI engine like ChatGPT or one of the other AI engines. And you can say, make this easier for a second language learner to understand. Boom. And then 10 seconds later, it has changed the syntax and has changed the vocabulary of that input to make it more comprehensible. Wow. I mean, that's something that you couldn't do 3 years ago. Okay, much less 10 years ago or 30 years ago when I was starting as a teacher. You can take input and you can make it more comprehensible just by asking AI to make it simpler, or to make the syntax simpler, or to change the vocabulary, and so on. So the first thing you as a language teacher should be doing is making the input that you're giving students more comprehensible. And you can do that now with AI. You can do that with a dialogue. You can do that with a story. You can do that with an explanation. You can take a news story. Lots of possibilities. That's number one. Number two, you can generate new AI. By generate, I mean you can create new comprehensible input. Let's say I'm interested in the geography of Southern Africa. I can say to my AI engine, I use ChatGPT. I can say to ChatGPT, write me 3 paragraphs about the geography of the southern part of Africa in French that's comprehensible to someone who's an intermediate French speaker. Boom, there it is. I have it, okay? You as a teacher can now start generating input on any topic you want. And that's going to become really important. I have a list of some of your questions. Somebody else asked a question later on that I'm going to come back to this example. But for right now, that's another way you can use AI. You can use AI now in some cases as a chatbot, so you can actually have a conversation, right? You can have a conversation at whatever level you are at right now, and you can have your students do the same thing. You can use AI to produce visuals and audio that will make input comprehensible. Let's say you have a very difficult story that you want students to read. If you can, so you can say to AI, here's the story, create a visual that students can look at that will help them understand the story. So I think most of you know all these things, right? AI can actually modify and create input that will make it more comprehensible and interesting to your students. So this is a huge thing. Will it, however, will in 10 years, if you come back to me in 10 years, will language teaching have changed completely? I don't know. I don't think so. Why? Because a fool with a tool is still a fool. And most people who are, I hate to say it this way, a lot of people who are teaching languages don't really understand language acquisition theory, especially professional companies that make software. Those people, they know how to use the software. They can produce software, but they don't understand language acquisition theory. And so even now, for example, if you go to an AI engine and you say, I want to learn French, how should I learn French? It will give you some really bad ideas, okay? AI also can give you some really bad ideas because it's based on, remember, it's AI it's an input-based system, right? It can only take what it learned and give it back to you. And if it doesn't learn anything about language acquisition theory, it's going to give you the traditional system. So it's a great question. I think there's a lot of ways that you as a new teacher can use it. How would I use it as a new teacher? Well, I would say, I want to teach a lesson about travel, about vocabulary and phrases used in traveling in an airplane. I would say to my AI agent, write me a lesson plan, and it will, right? And then I'll say, write me 5 dialogues that use the following 4 phrases at least twice. It'll do that, okay? I mean, as a teacher, if I were teaching English still in the classroom, that would be amazing, okay? I wish I would have had that 30 years ago when I was teaching English in a classroom. So there's a lot of things you can do with it. Also, you can use it to improve your own English. Let's say you're going to write something for your teachers, for your students, but you're not quite sure whether the English is right or whether you're using the idiom right. You can just say to the AI, correct this for me. Boom. Makes you look better, right? All of a sudden, your English is perfect because the AI has helped you. I do this with my Spanish all the time. Finally, you can also use AI just to solve problems. Let's say you're having a problem in your classroom. Just ask the AI and see what it says. It might give you a bad answer, but at least it gives you some ideas to think about, right? So AI is going to change our entire way of thinking about language teaching if, and this is a big if we can use it correctly. So I'm sorry I went on a little long for that question because it's such a good question. I wanted to give it the time it deserved. All right, sorry. Next person.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Next question is going to come from Hadis Morado. Hadis, are you there? Hadis, do you have my voice?
Yes.
Yes,
Hi.
please. Hadis, go ahead.
My question is how to make a motivating environment for our student to acquire language more easily based on effective filter hypothesis.
Okay, how to make it more motivating? That's a great question. Thank you. Okay, motivation is something that we talk about a lot in language teaching theory. I want to talk a little bit about motivation from a different perspective. Typically, when we talk about motivation, as you probably know, we talk about 2 kinds of motivation. We talk about extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is motivation that you get from the outside of you. So, for example, your teacher will say, there's a test tomorrow, you better study. That's extrinsic motivation, because if you don't study, you're going to fail. And if you fail, you're not going to get your teaching certificate, okay? So that's, or when your mother says, clean your room, or you're not going to go out tonight, or I'm not going to let you use your your Facebook app tonight, okay? When a mother says that to her daughter or son, that's extrinsic motivation. In other words, the motivation is, if I don't do this, I'm not going to get what I want, okay? The other kind of motivation is intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation, intrinsic motivation is what comes from inside of you. I want to do this. I want to learn how to swim. Nobody's telling me to swim. I'm not going to be punished if I don't learn how to swim, but I want to learn how to swim. That comes from within me. That's intrinsic motivation. Now, when you look at the research on language acquisition, what we discover is that students who have a lot of intrinsic motivation, they really want to learn the language, they do better than students with extrinsic motivation. They're only learning it because they need to pass this class, or their university requires them to learn another language and pass a test, okay? That's obvious, right? You know that already. If you really want to do something, you're going to do better at it. All right. So that's all about motivation. Now, I want to introduce another M word, okay? Motivation starts with an M, but there's another more important word that starts with an M, and that is membership. Membership. What does it mean to be a member of a group, a member of a club, a member of a family? All right. When you're a member of something, you feel part of it. It's something that you feel like you belong to. And one of the things that we also know about language acquisition, and this is related to intrinsic motivation, but it's not exactly the same thing. One of the things we know is that when you feel like you're a member of the group, you are going to be more motivated, more interested in learning whatever it is that group is going to learn. In fact, you don't even have to think about it in terms of motivation, right? Let's say we all have parents, right? We all have mothers and fathers. Some of you maybe are parents yourself, okay? Let's say that your child starts, or you, when you were younger, you start becoming friends with somebody who maybe isn't a very good person, maybe is involved in something criminal, maybe is somebody who likes to steal or whatever, okay, something bad. Your parents are going to be very concerned about you, aren't they? And you as a parent, if it were your child, you would be very concerned about who your child is becoming a member of, what group, okay, who their friends are. We care about who our friends are because our friends influence us. You don't say, oh, well, my child is a very slow learner. Don't worry, he won't pick up any of those bad habits, okay? No, we don't say that. Group membership is so powerful that you don't even have to think about it. You are going to take on the aspects of that group. So what we want to do for our students is make them feel like they're members of a group. What group? The group that becomes fluent in English. We want to give our students that sense that they are part of a group. Now, how do you get students to feel like they're part of a group? I think there are a couple of different ways of doing this. One way is, and this is not specific to language teaching, this is true for all teaching, okay? You want to make sure that you care about your students. Now, that seems like a weird thing to say for a talk about language acquisition, but it's true. Your students need to know that you care about them. You're interested in them. You are concerned about them as students, as human beings. Because when you do that, then they're going to like you better as a teacher. How do you do that? Well, one thing you do is you ask them questions. One thing I used to do in the beginning of every class, we had to take roll. I don't know if you do this in your classrooms, but you have to read the list of the names of the students, and you say, oh, are you here? Okay, check. Are you here? Okay, check, right? What I would do, and I would do that every day, is I would take one or two students. I would say, John, are you here? John, how's it going? What did you do last night, John? Did you? Oh, okay, good. Oh, nice shirt you got on there. And then I would go down, I'd read a bunch of more names. Susie, hey, how's it going? Susie, aren't you on the basketball team? Yeah, oh, that's nice. You win last night? Good. Okay, blah, 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 blah. That just takes you 5 seconds, 10 seconds. But suddenly your students think, oh, this teacher cares about me. This teacher is someone who is concerned about who I am, not just as a student, but as a human being. That's really important. That's important for any teacher. But for language teaching, I think it's even more important because language is your students are very anxious. They're under stress, right? They're feeling anxiety because they're in a world that they don't understand usually. They don't understand what you're saying. And understanding language is a basic thing about being human, right? When you're in a math class or a history class, well, the teacher's speaking a language you understand. Even if you don't understand math, you understand Farsi, right? You understand Persian. But now you're in a class where you don't even understand the language. So it's a very stressful situation to be in. And the more you as a teacher can relax students by increasing their sense of a membership in your group, the better off you're going to be. I have a little more to say about motivation. Somebody else has a question about motivation. I'll come back to that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But one of the things you want to think about more than anything is how can I make my students feel like they're members of my class and members of the group of people who speak English. And the more you can do that, the less motivation becomes a problem. Okay? We'll come back. I'll say a little bit more about motivation because. Oops.
Yeah, you're okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
New earbuds. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much. Mobina, you're up next.
It's my honor to be able to ask you my question. My question is that does acquisition just happen to native speakers?
Okay, good question. Does acquisition just happen to native speakers? No, it happens to everyone. In fact, the only way that we are able to use language is by acquiring it. Remember, there's two different kinds of language knowledge. There's acquisition and there's learning. Acquisition is unconscious knowledge. It's the knowledge that you don't even know that you have, really. It's the knowledge that your brain has that you're able to use to understand and to speak. Learning is conscious knowledge. It's what you study. It's what you can say. It's the rules that you can name, okay? That's learning. Those are two different kinds of knowledge that an adult brain has. Notice I say an adult brain because children don't have learning. They only have acquisition, right? A 2-year-old child doesn't know any rules consciously. He knows the rules in terms of acquisition. That's the only kind of knowledge that he has. All adults and children, whether in their first language, their second language, their 10th language, whether they're American, Iranian, whether they speak English, whether they speak French, it doesn't matter. All human beings acquire language. Now, some people acquire more than one language, but it's the same basic process. All language use and knowledge, or 95% of language use and knowledge, is acquisition. So really, there's no other way of doing it. Okay, the only way to become fluent. The question you just asked me came from your acquired system of knowledge. That's all of us have. Okay, now some of us also have learning. Some of us also have some learning of language. Some of us have more learning than acquisition. Some of us have more acquisition than learning. But the only thing that we really can use on a day-to-day basis is acquisition. So acquisition is not just for native speakers. You have acquisition in English. Some of you may have acquisition in another language. Amir probably has acquisition in Turkish, I'm guessing. It doesn't matter how many languages you speak or what language you speak, it's all acquisition, okay? Now, that doesn't mean learning isn't important, okay? I'm not saying that. I'm saying, however, that 95% of your use of language is acquisition. That's what the brain is using right now as I'm speaking, and that's what your brain is using right now as you're listening. Okay, you're not using your learned system. It's impossible. You wouldn't have time to do it, because in order to use your learned system, you would have to know every rule, know the rule, you would have to have time to use the rule, and you'd have to be focused on the rule. And that's not the case right now. You're listening to what I am saying, and you're trying to understand what I am saying. And if you're trying to understand what I'm saying, you're using your acquisition almost by definition. Okay, so a good question, but the answer is no, it's not just for native speakers.
Thanks, John. Maybe I should have told you. So tonight's audience have acquired Persian and Azeri. So there are two languages most of us have acquired, because we come from Zanjan, which is to the northwestern part of Iran, where we speak Farsi and Azeri. So we have acquired two. Most of us have acquired two languages.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
Yeah. Mariam Shakuri, are you there? Mariam Shakuri. Yes,
yes.
Mariam.
Hi.
Yes. Yeah, you go.
My question is, a student who are sitting in class with family force or such a thing, should we create interest in them? But what's the best way to create interest in such students?
Okay, that's an interesting question about creating interest, and it kind of relates to the motivation question, right? Because there's there's some similarities here. What motivates you in your own life to do things? That's what whenever you have a problem in your classroom, you should always stop and think, okay, if I were a student, if I'm sitting in in that seat instead of up here teaching, what's going through my head? How would I think about this problem? All right. So imagine that you're a student in your own classroom and you're bored, okay? Or you're not very interested. Why? Ask yourself, why is that? There could be a couple of reasons. One reason, especially in a language classroom, is that you don't understand the teacher. If you don't understand the teacher, you're going to get bored, right? Because there's nothing for you to grasp. There's nothing for you to comprehend. The teacher's going blah, 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 and you're going, I don't know, right? So maybe the problem is that the teacher's talking too fast. Maybe the problem is that the teacher is not using simple language. Maybe the problem is the teacher isn't using things to help the students understand the input, to make the input comprehensible. So when you're in a situation where the input is incomprehensible, you're going to be bored or you're going to be unmotivated because there's nothing to motivate you or interest you because you can't understand it. Okay, that's one issue. A second issue is, let's say you can understand the language, but you're still bored. Now what's the problem? Now the problem is that what the teacher is talking about is not interesting to you. Well, how do you solve this problem? How do you solve the problem of you talking about the teacher talking about one thing and the students not interested in what you're talking about? Well, there's only two ways to solve that problem, right? One way is the students have to change their interests. The students have to become interested suddenly, or you have to change what you're talking about. You have to talk about something that the students are interested in. Everybody knows what a Venn diagram is, right? In math, this is a Venn diagram. I apologize, I'm not a great math, right? Those are two circles, right? In one circle, we're going to put the teacher. And in one circle, we're going to put the student, okay? Here's our teacher. And here are students, okay? Teacher, student, right? Okay. The teacher, you, have things that you're interested in, or maybe things that you have to talk about in your classroom because that's what your curriculum is, okay? So you have certain things that you want to talk about, and the students have certain things that they want to talk about or they're interested in. Your job as the teacher is to do one of two things. Either you have to make your students interested in what you're talking about, or you have to talk about something that you're interested in and the students are interested in. You have to talk about things that are in the intersection of these two circles, okay? So you need to find ways of talking about things that are either going to interest your students in, which means you have to be excited about it. Remember, if you're bored, they're going to be bored. Okay, there's no way that you're going to get your students interested in a topic if you're not interested in the topic. And if you're not interested in the topic, why are you talking about it? Okay, you know, maybe you have to, okay, but you need to find a way to make it interesting to yourself. That's the first job. So you have to be interested in something. Then you have to find a way to talk about it in such a way that your students become interested in it. Or you have to talk about something your students are interested in. Now, how do you know what your students are interested in? Here's an idea. Ask them. Ask your students towards the beginning of your class, maybe the first day of your class, you pass out a list of topics that you think your students might be interested in and find out what they're interested in. Now, are you going to be able to talk about all of those things? No. Maybe you're only going to be able to talk about some of those things. But if you can find something that your students are already interested in and you're interested in, boom. Now you've solved the problem of interest. Now suddenly you can be talking about things in the classroom that your students are interested in. Remember, we were just talking about AI? You know what AI can do? Yeah. AI can generate input on any topic. Let's say you have 5 students who are really interested in, I don't know, video gaming, right? Students are interested in video gaming. I'm too old for that. Okay, that's way before my time. Okay, I'm way before that time, I should say. But a lot of students love video gaming. A lot of students love fashion. Some students like sports. Okay, do you know that you can go to AI and you can say, write me a dialogue or a story that is in the past tense, that maybe uses this vocabulary, travel vocabulary, but that is somehow related to gaming, fashion, sports. And then you print those things out. And who's interested in sports? Boom. Who's interested in fashion? Boom. Who's interested in that? Boom. Okay, read those things, talk about them in a small group. You're giving them individual assignments, basically, based on their own interests. AI can do that now. Wow. Wow, that's amazing. That's something that we haven't been able to do in the history of language teaching. And suddenly, on November 14th, 2024, at, well, 8:33 in Los Angeles, I can do that now. That's amazing, okay? You as a teacher can now find things and create things that are interesting to your students. Now, maybe not everyone is going to be able to do that in the classroom, right? You may not be able to talk about fashion in the classroom, but maybe one day you're talking about fashion and one day you're talking about sports and one day you're talking about travel. Finding things that your students are already interested in, that's a good place to start. But you as a teacher also have to make things interesting for them. And so in order for you to make it interesting, you've got to be interested in it. Never teach something that's boring to you, because if it's boring to you, you're going to bore your students. All right. The ideal situation, the perfect situation, is in the middle here. You're interested, students are interested. That is going to give you, then you don't have to worry about motivation and affective filter. All that stuff's going to go away, because you've suddenly found things that are compelling, that are really interesting to you and to the student. And that's just a matter of you as a teacher finding out what your students are interested in and what they're not interested in, and you adjusting your teaching to find that middle ground where the both things are connected. Good question.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Actually, speaking of interest, Jeff, I've seen students in different parts of the world, and we are so lucky in Iran. We have some of the most interested and motivated students to learn English. which is really great. Sahil, you're gonna ask the next question, which is the fifth one. Are you ready?
Yeah, I
Okay,
am.
you're there. Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, first of all, it's an honor to have you here and to seize information from you. And then my question was that we've seen many people recommending watching movies as a source of reinforcement for learning and acquiring a language. So, briefly talking, I wanted to ask that does watching movies consistently actually influence learning a language or even acquiring a language?
Yeah, good, very good question. And do you watch movies?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think it's helped your English?
Yes, it
Yes.
did.
There's your answer.
Thank you.
Remember,
Very brief.
remember. Think of yourself as the student, right? If it helped you, it's probably a good idea. Okay. Now, but I have a longer answer. I'm joking a little. Okay. Don't. It's a really good question. We know, for example, from the research that captioning on movies, if you have the captions on, you're going to acquire more English. And if you don't have the captions on, and the reason, of course, is that the captions make it more comprehensible. By the way, when I watch British television, because the accent is different, I always have the captions on. Always. I can't understand a Scottish accent. It's really hard, or an Irish accent. So even I, in native speaker, have the captions on when I'm watching, things from other countries that I don't understand. Yes, watching movies is a great source if you can understand most of what's going on in the movie. Now, so if you're watching, say, an American movie, if you're a beginning student, that's not going to be very useful unless the teacher does something to help the student understand it. Okay. And I've tried using movies in the classroom. Unless the student is advanced, I put it this way. If the student is an advanced student, like you obviously are, because your English is amazing, then yes, it will help, because it's mostly comprehensible input. However, for a beginning student or even an intermediate student, it is very likely to be incomprehensible input. And if it's incomprehensible input, the student can't really understand it. And if the student can't understand it, the student will not benefit from it. I have a friend of mine who came over from China many years ago, 30, 40 years ago. If he watches movies, he has television on, in English, okay, but the movies, he can't understand them. It doesn't help him to watch movies. It's too high. The input is too high. One of the biggest problems we have as teachers is we try to give students input that is too high for them. You need to make it easier. Now, can you make a movie interesting in your classroom? Yes, you can pass out the script to students, the dialogue. You can go over the dialogue before they watch it. Then they can watch it and follow along. Then after they watch it, you can go through the dialogue again and talk about it. It's okay. It's not the best activity because, again, I think it's just too hard for most students. It would be better to find something easy. Now, there are lots of videos on YouTube or on other resources that are in easier English. And so if I were going to want to use video in the classroom, I would definitely find something that's easier for them to understand. And what makes something easier to understand? Talking slower, using simpler syntax, using lower vocabulary, right? And having visuals that help the student understand what is being spoken, okay? So movies are great for people who are advanced. They're okay for students if you help them. I think it's better to try to use other video sources, especially if you're talking about lower and intermediate students, okay? So that's my answer.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Our next teaching candidate is Fatima Haydari. Fatima, are you there? Fatima Haydari. Yeah.
I'm here.
Yes,
you hear
please.
me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So before I
before I ask my question, I just wanted to take a second and thank you and thank IZ team for this opportunity, and I'm so grateful. So back to my question. When we want to teach our students something new, for example, a new grammar, a new structure, and we want them to use it, they're going to use it consciously. They're going to think about it. But that's not what we want. We want them to be able to use it unconsciously, so it's more smooth and more fluent. So here's my question. How does conscious knowledge become unconscious? By repetition, or it just takes time?
Yeah, good question. The answer is it never becomes conscious to unconscious. Conscious knowledge never becomes unconscious knowledge. Never. It never happens. They're two completely different systems, okay? They're two completely different systems in your brain. Imagine your brain has a space over here for conscious and over here for unconscious. Those two parts are never going to meet. Now, what is true, and what I think is at the base of your question, is that we can have both kinds of knowledge. You can have conscious knowledge and unconscious knowledge. You can have unconscious knowledge first and then conscious knowledge. So when you were growing up learning your 2 languages, okay, and you get to school and the teacher starts teaching you some rules about language, if you've already acquired those languages, if you're already unconscious knowledge of those languages, you're going to go, oh yeah, that's why that is. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. When we have the knowledge unconsciously, it's very easy to get it consciously. Okay. Because we've already acquired it. It's more of a, oh, I get it. That's what it is. Okay. If you are learning a second language and you learn the rule consciously, okay, you may later acquire it. So you can learn it. For example, here's an example. You can learn on the very, very first day of class the rule for the third person singular S in English. And you as a teacher probably know that rule. I go, he goes. I go, you go, he goes, right? You put the S at the end of the verb, really easy rule, no problem. I can teach that rule on the very first day of class. However, acquiring that rule can take years and years and years. In fact, there are some people, a lot of people, who learn English as an adult and never acquire it. Because when you hear them speaking, if they're speaking, say, in a conversation, they'll go, oh, yeah, he go to the store. What? No, he goes to the store. You can hear this all the time. You may make this mistake yourself. It's perfectly normal. It's totally okay. Okay. The acquisition system is slower. It's going to not necessarily pick up things for a long time. How does it do it? It only does it one way. There's only one way to get your acquisition system to be bigger. And that is, say it with me together, guys, comprehensible input. The only way to improve your acquisition is to get lots and lots of interesting, comprehensible input. Reading, watching movies, talking to people, listening to people, comprehensible input, listening and reading, listening and reading. That's how you can improve your acquired system. Now, in the classroom, you may have things that you have to teach, right? So you have the structure, and your curriculum says you have to teach the past tense of the verb to be, okay? Well, you're going to be able to teach that consciously to your students. How can you help them acquire it? Give them lots of comprehensible input that uses that structure or that uses that vocabulary. Now, will that necessarily mean that they will acquire it? No, it won't, but it will help them. It will definitely help them. If I were given a set of structures, if I have a curriculum and I have to teach these 5 structures, I would make sure that I would go to my AI and I would create 30 dialogues that use that structure, or I would create a 500-word story or a 1,000-word story that use that structure 20 times or whatever, okay? And I would make sure that students got lots and lots of exposure to that structure. Does that mean they'll acquire it? No, but it will help them. Now, if we're talking just about vocabulary instead of syntax, right? So I'm talking, when you say structure, I'm thinking syntax. I'm thinking like verb tenses, for example. But if you're talking like just expressions or idioms or phrases, well, that is in fact a matter of repetition. And that is something that you can give students lots of input in. If I give you something to read that contains a new word that you don't know, say 20, 25 times, and I do that over a period of, say, a week. So every day I give you something and that word appears 5 times, 5 times, 5 times, 5 times. You're going to acquire that word, okay? Repetition does work for vocabulary. It doesn't necessarily work for syntax. Two different things. So if we're talking about vocabulary structures, oh yeah, give them lots of you don't have to have them, you don't tell them to memorize it. You don't say, here's a list, go home and memorize it. No, 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 no. You give them comprehensible input that has it in there, that has it embedded. It's part of the structure. It's part of the story, rather. It's part of the dialogue. You don't have to even point it out. It just appears. If it appears enough times, they're going to acquire it. So you can give them focused comprehensible input, right? Focused comprehensible input is it contains a lot of what you want them to acquire in terms of vocabulary. That will work, okay? I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jeff. Jeff, how are we with time?
I'm good.
You're okay? Do we have 10 more minutes?
Oh yeah, no problem.
Okay, yeah, 10 more minutes then. Ali, I suppose you have a question to ask, Ali, yes?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
So first, let me say that it's really nice to meet you again, Professor. I mean, the previous time was really helpful, and yeah, it was a fruitful session. And today, I have a question that's been, made in my mind through my classes, the classes that I've taken. Let me just simulate the situation for you, then ask the question about it. There are times when you are in a class and you are teaching something, and suddenly you see your students so stressed out and looking at you, wondering what's that about. And that's that happens even though you're using the I+1 method, and your students, and they don't understand anything. They're just like, yeah. And that's when a teacher, actually myself, wonder if I should use their mother tongue to comprehend the thing that I'm teaching, better or not. And I know that the supervisors and the veteran teachers in IZ mean that speaking Persian is strictly forbidden in the class. So that's when you wonder whether to use the mother tongue of the students and the learners, or just keep on going by the I+1 and English. Yeah. My question is whether to use their mother tongue or not.
Okay. Ali,
thank you.
You're what we call a troublemaker, Ali. I can tell.
Yeah,
it's that long hair. It's that long hair. Did you? It's gotten longer, I think, since the last time we talked.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. All right, Ali. All right, I will answer your question. I like the hair.
One of the best students.
Okay. It's a good question. Can you use the first language in the classroom? First of all, I totally understand the policy of not using Persian or whatever the first language is. Especially, okay, so there are two different situations here. There's a English as a second language and English as a foreign language, right? You're in a situation where English is a foreign language. I'm in a situation here in the United States where English is a second language. So students are surrounded by English. I used to teach English at the University of Southern California, and international students, from all over the world. And when they left the classroom, English was everywhere. Okay, they would be surrounded by English. In your situation, it's quite different. When you walk out the door, I mean, yes, there's English, right, available in your world, but most people are not speaking English. So one of the reasons why English as a foreign language schools often say to their teachers, only speak English, is because your students have so few opportunities to get comprehensible English. They can get lots of English on the internet, right? But comprehensible English, that's a very difficult thing for them to get, other than in your classroom. In fact, your classroom is like an oasis, right, in the middle of the desert. Okay, they're in a desert of English. There's no good English around them, and your classroom is the one place where they can get good comprehensible English. So it's perfectly, I think, understandable to say, use as much English as you possibly can in your classroom. Now, your question is, well, what if students are anxious? What if students don't understand? Okay, I think there are a couple of ways of doing that. Is it okay to occasionally, I'm going to say occasionally, every once in a while, use the language of the student in order to explain a difficult concept? I think it's okay if you do it. The word I would use here is sparingly, not very much. It's like spice in your food. You don't want to put too much in there. I don't want to put too much in there. Okay, just a little bit. Okay, a little bit of pepper. Too much pepper, no. You want to use the language only to make things that are maybe really different. For example, how do you explain the word however to students, or the word although to students? Conjunctions are really, function words are really hard to communicate even with good, you can get it, they will get it eventually, but sometimes just a little bit is okay, but very little. If your students are anxious, or if your students don't understand, then you are doing something else wrong. It's not the English. Okay, it's not the fact that you can't use their first language. It's that you as a teacher are doing something else wrong. What are you doing wrong? Remember, I said to the previous question, think of yourself as the student. If you're the student and you're not understanding it, or you're not anxious, why? Well, I can think of two good reasons. One, the teacher is not making the input comprehensible. They're not using visuals. They're not speaking slowly enough. They're not using simple vocabulary. They're not talking about something I'm interested in. Or the teacher is bored and they're not doing something to make themselves interested. Okay, so you as a teacher have a responsibility. It's not the student's responsibility. You as a teacher have the responsibility to make things comprehensible for your students. And, there's an expression we have in English, to read the room. To read, like, read a book, but not read a book. Read the room. A good teacher knows how to read the room. So the situation you were just talking about, Ali, is you're reading the room and you're seeing that the room, the people out there, they're not following you, or they're anxious. Okay, that's the sign of a good teacher. Okay, a good teacher knows how to read the room. So Ali, you're a good teacher. You know how to read the room. What you need to do now as a teacher is think of how you can change that dynamic, change that situation, make your English more comprehensible, make your students less anxious. What are things that make you as a student anxious? One thing is this teacher going to call on me? Am I going to have to say something that I'm not ready to say? Often I find in language classrooms, teachers are trying to push their students too quickly in terms of output. They're trying to make their students talk before their students are ready to talk. So if you're doing a lot of if you're doing a lot of output, you're making the students talk before they're ready. If you're doing a lot of calling on you. The students are going, no, don't call on me. Don't call on me. Okay. That sort of thing will make students anxious. So think of what you're doing as a teacher that might be making students anxious and stop doing that. It's like if it's really hot outside, okay, what do? You go somewhere where it's cooler, right? You get some ice and you put it on yourself. You take a shower, okay? You as the teacher need to lower the temperature in the classroom if your students are anxious. You need to think about what you're doing to make students anxious, all right? You are the person in charge, not the student. And so if something's going wrong in the classroom, I'm sorry, but it's your fault, okay? You need to do something different. Now, you have some students that you're always going to have problem students, the ones with the long hair, for example, all right? But, but you as a teacher have the primary responsibility for making sure that you're interesting, you're comprehensible, and that it's a low stress environment. All right. Good question, Ali. I hope you don't mind my joke.
I thank you. It was a complete answer. Yep. And another thing, let me add one thing. Is it permissible to lower the input, the speaking, more than I+1? Lower than that, so
yes,
they can understand.
Yes.
So
absolutely,
much lower. Okay. So
yep,
I'll do. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant questions. I'm proud of you guys. And Jeff, thank you so much. Just a couple of final words before we say goodbye. I know you have other commitments, Jeff. Guys, people in a lower position than Jeff usually charge, I don't know, $400, $500, $600, and even more. Jeff has never charged us, and he's doing it for free. And I don't know how to thank Jeff, actually. I mean, he has opened the borders for us in Iran. And Jeff, speaking of Iran, I'm not sure if you know about all the limitations and sanctions and a lot of stupid things which have made barriers, and Iranian audience are not usually lucky enough to have the luxury of attending high class, top class like events and seminars in the world. But Jeff, you have opened the window through which we can actually get knowledge, top knowledge, like first-hand knowledge from the most reliable source, which is from you. So thank you so much, Jeff. This is a great opportunity for all of us. And Purya, do you have any words? Purya, Mariam, we have two of our trainers with us here, Jeff. Purya and Mariam are with us tonight, and the others are young future teachers, and they're so lucky to sit this meeting tonight. Purya, Mariam, any words before we say goodbye?
If I may, Professor, taking a sip of your knowledge is always an opportunity. And I was talking about the same thing before the meeting with Mr. Khani, and thank you so very much. Even though I've been to almost all sessions, I took notes. And I had some questions, but because of the shortage of time, I will leave my questions for future sessions. And thank you so very much.
Say, Purya, can I say one thing? When I first met Purya, his beard wasn't gray.
Yeah.
Right? You had a black beard, I think. I mean, it's many years ago. Many years ago.
Yeah. Well,
students. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, and apologies again for not knowing that daylight saving plan in the US, and then all of those things, but it's worth it for whatever it is, for all the inconveniences in the world. It is
every single second.
For Jeff.
All right, next.
I said every single second. I really mean it.
It's worth it.
Yes.
Yes,
right,
Jeff.
thank you.
Yeah, all the best, Jeff.
All right.
Have a wonderful
Thank
day,
you.
Jeff. Guys.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Have a good
Goodbye.
day.
Thank you.
You're going to have a good day.
Yeah.
So, do we have the after party or what?
After party.
We might. So take care.
We will.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for
Cheers.
this
All the
practical
best.
session.
All the
Thank you.
best. Apologies again to everyone, and all the
It's
best.
okay. It's all
Thank you
right.
very much. Thank you
Take care.
for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pania. Thank you. Thank you, Sahil. Thank you, everybody. Everybody. Yeah, Mariam, thank you so much
Thank you.
for joining. Yeah, all the best. Bye.